like to welcome all of you to our talk this morning. And of course, we have our special guest with us here today, Dr. Robert Biswas-Diener, a very highly respected lecturer of our school. Before we introduce him proper, let me first introduce Stephen Liu, my co-host for today's talk. Stephen is the founder of the School of Positive Psychology. He is a trained hypnotherapist as well as psychotherapist. And he also has a master's in applied positive psychology. And he has been invited to many organizations, both private as well as public, as well as local and overseas organizations, to share his expertise on positive psychology, on how employees and the workplace can elevate the well-being. Stephen is also a practicing positive psychology coach, which is the focus of our talk today. So let's hear from Stephen.
Thank you for the great introduction, Kim. And I just have to say that I'm very grateful to be here today to welcome all of you, and even more grateful that to have Robert here as a speaker. So without further ado, please join me to say hello to Robert. Hi, Robert.
Hey, thank you for the kind introduction. So I was asked to talk a little bit about positive psychology coaching, and I thought I might just give you kind of a broad overview of my current thinking. Stefan really hit it on the nose when he said, Robert's always presenting something new. So if you took a course from me or training from me 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I'm thinking new things since then. Just like you, I evolve over time, right? So the stuff I said to those, executives and leaders 10 years ago or in 2010, I probably disagree with most of that stuff now. I probably am a little embarrassed by it. And you're like, how could I have said that? And with what confidence did I say it too? Wow. And I look forward to one day being embarrassed by what I'm about to say to you now, because it will be a marker that my thinking has progressed so much. So here's what I'd like to do just over the next 8 minutes or so. Buckle up. I'm going to say a lot. You can already see that I am in a speaking quickly mood. I don't mind if you take notes. It's fine. It's good for learning. The data are clear on that. I'm going to tell you a tiny bit about what I think about coaching, and then I'm going to draw distinctions between coaching in general and positive psychology coaching specifically. So hopefully that'll be of use to you. And then I think Stefan and I will just talk a little bit. People here probably have differing backgrounds with coaching. Here's what I think coaching is. Coaching is a conversational technology. That is, the conversation is the unit of the intervention. So you might say, well, maybe that describes medicine, because after all, doctors ask for your symptoms, and so you're having a conversation. But that's not the primary way that doctors learn everything they need to know about you. They use imaging technologies, blood tests, scanning devices, all sorts of technologies besides conversation to understand things. That's not true of coaches. Coaches primarily use the conversation. And the conversation is an inquiry-based conversation. That is, we pose questions that provoke reflection in the client. So the principal value of a coach is not in helping the client make progress towards their goals. It's not in helping the client achieve their goals. I don't promise my clients that they'll make progress towards their goals or achieve their goals. How would I know? Instead, I promise them that I'll show up and be present, that I will be a good thought partner to them, because that suddenly is the primary value of a coach. It is in the thought partnership. One thing that coaches do is we help clients organize their thinking. If I ask you a question such as, well, you're working on many different worthwhile goals right now. What are the factors by which you prioritize them? I'm helping you to organize your thinking by thinking about how you make decisions, how you employ your values. What are the factors, besides just thinking all your goals are important, that affect which one you're working on today versus which one you're working on tomorrow, and thinking through that process. thinking, well, I think deadlines must be a factor. The availability of my collaborators must be a factor. My energy level must be a factor. My other demands in life must be a factor. The list goes on and on. But as soon as you start thinking of those things, it helps you. That is of benefit. In addition to organizing our thoughts, we help clients gain self-awareness. So if a client suddenly knows what they know and what they don't know, if they know how they come across to others, if they know what their resources are, both external and internal resources, that's helpful for a client, because then they can make better decisions about how to manage themselves, how to motivate themselves, how to deploy their resources, and so forth. That's mostly what I do. And so when you see coaching happen, it often just looks like the coach asking a lot of questions. And that can be really difficult for people learning to coach, because there's such a temptation to feel like you have solutions for your client and that you want to give a little bit of advice, or you want to steer them a little bit, or you want to mentor them a little bit. But coaching really is primarily inquiry driven. And so there is a humility that goes with coaching, that just because I think I have the solution for you, I know a ton about work-life balance, but I don't know what makes sense in your life with your particular demands in your cultural context. So I need to use my knowledge to form good questions and have you take ownership of what a work-life balance plan would be, instead of me telling you. That's what coaching is in general. And regardless of where you get training on coaching, it basically looks the same. It starts with an agenda in the beginning of the session. The coach asks tons of questions in the middle, and then often it wraps up with a little bit of, okay, now that you've got some insights, what are you going to do with them? A little bit of planning. So that's broadly speaking, that's sort of generic coaching. Positive psychology coaching is distinct in a couple of ways, but I want to start by how it's not distinct. It's not distinct in that when you see me do positive psychology coaching, it just looks like coaching. In fact, that is the biggest piece of feedback that I get. I'll do a coaching demonstration and people will be like, but that was just coaching. Yeah, did you expect it to look like hockey or basketball or something else? Like, it's just coaching. But it's informed by positive psychology. So positive psychology is a science, and I allow the science in many different ways to inform my coaching. So that's one distinguishing feature, that we prioritize empiricism, that is the scientific method, as a way of knowing. There's many great ways of knowing in the world. There's faith, intuition, common sense, advice, received wisdom from your grandmother, all totally legitimate. But in positive psychology coaching, we say we want to double down on science. And what this means, and what I'm most excited about, is it means we get to change our minds as new data emerge. So the stuff that I was writing about in 2010, 2011, I don't do those things anymore, because now we have new data and new understanding, and it's more sophisticated. Sometimes you might meet, I don't know, managers or coaches in your life, and they feel like they've got it all figured out. Like, do you really think that we figured out management? And like, now we just know how to do it? Why are all these management books coming out if we just totally know how to do it? Do you think we've just figured out all this stuff? We haven't. These are such, nascent fields, such new fields that that I think that we have to continue to engage and question. And that's why I love the scientific method. In addition to the scientific method, we prioritize well-being explicitly with clients. So in traditional coaching, there can be goals at any cost mentality. Like, I'm just here for bottom line performance. I'm going to help you perform. But in positive psychology coaching, we say, I would love to assist you in talking about your performance, but never at the cost of your well-being or the well-being of other important stakeholders. That is going to be part of our conversations. How much well-being are you willing to give up for this performance? Where are there ways that you won't have to give up well-being for this performance? How do you recharge so that you, in fact, can have good performance over the long term? How are you maintaining your well-being? Because we double down on this because the idea is your well-being is the foundation upon which performance and relationships and health are built. So we can't treat it like an add-on. I think those are actually the two biggest things that distinguish positive psychology coaching from other forms of coaching. Just the explicit focus on well-being and the explicit alignment with science and the being informed by positive psychological science in particular. But ultimately, it's just going to look like coaching when you see it. When I do positive psychology coaching, it is nearly invisible. It just looks organic. And I don't use phrases often like strengths or happiness. It just happens in the interaction without me calling attention to it. So I'm going to stop there because I said a ton of stuff and maybe I'm losing people. I don't know. But hopefully that just creates a good enough foundation that now we can take it from here. Stephen.
Thank you, Robert. I think thanks for explaining the distinct difference between coaching and positive psychology coaching. And I think that many of our attendees here today are already coaches, and also some of them are considering to be one. So I just want to ask the question about, as in terms of coaching, right? Because the title of today's Q&A or talk is challenging status quo for great coaching. So what do you think are the three key or three main status quo in coaching that you think or you feel need to be challenged?
Just that's a good question, right? That's like a coaching question because it forces me to articulate and narrow it to three, because I think there's like 70. Yeah. I mean, I just wrote a book that has 25 fundamental questions, so that was 25, and I've got an additional list here of 15 more. And those are just the ones I thought of, right? So I'm obviously not thinking of everything. I think that because you guys have some sophistication with coaching, you understand this. One of our primary values is to be able to engage our clients in new thinking. That's why self-coaching is so difficult, right? There's all this like hubbub about self-coaching, but you'll only ever be able to ask yourself questions that you yourself can think of to ask yourself. Coaches can ask you questions that you've never thought of. So, just by way of example, when someone comes to me and they say, oh, I'm thinking about taking a job in Tokyo, I would never say, oh, what are the pros and cons of taking that job? It's not a good coaching question. Your client's already thought of it. 100% chance your client has already thought of the pros and cons of the job in Tokyo. What they need for you is to ask them something that they've never thought of. So maybe you ask them a question like, how certain do you have to be before making a decision? And they probably haven't thought to ask themselves that. And so that's a more provocative question. I believe that the field of coaching should be asking ourselves these exact same provocative questions. We should be using the same technology on ourselves that we use to great effect on our clients. So for those of you who are ensconced in the coaching culture, you'll hear little phrases all the time, right? Things like, I don't believe in shoulds, right? If you're familiar with this phrase, I don't believe in shoulds, by which people mean, oh, don't be so hard on yourself. You're feeling the sense of obligation and you're making things difficult. But of course you should believe in shoulds. Show me a culture anywhere in the world that doesn't prize duty, loyalty, or obligation. A world without shoulds would be a dystopian, horrible place to live. If I've ever, struck by a car, say, you should call for immediate assistance and help me. I believe in shoulds heavily. So what I'm getting at, just with this single, almost silly example, is that I think that we need to really ask ourselves tough questions. Here's one of the things that I think prevents coaches from asking tough questions. They think they're doing it right. And you know what being wrong feels like? It feels like being right. So when I see coaches say like, oh, you know, I'm asking amazing questions and I've got this framework I use and I'm using this tool and it's great for all my clients, there is a degree of certainty in that I find unsettling. And this is the one thing I've noticed distinguishes master level coaches or highly experienced coaches from coaches early in their career: degree of certainty. When I talk to my colleagues, I think this is my 20th year of coaching. When I talk to my colleagues that have, you know, more experience than I do, or about the same amount, I hear them say things like, I'm not sure that I'm expert in anything. I don't know what I'm certain of. I'm just happy to think of new questions. I'm always looking to change the way I do things. And I'll give you just a quick example of this. I was working with some advanced coaches this morning, yesterday for you. And I said, do you believe that it's ethical to sell coaching packages? Do you think it's ethical, you know, to say, if you sign on with me as a coach, 4 sessions, this is how much it costs? And some of them were shocked that I would even be asking that question, because it's standard practice. This is what coaches do. But if you've never asked yourself that question, I think you're doing it wrong. What I'm more impressed by is coaches who say, that's a good question, and I've already spent more than 10 hours with my colleagues discussing it, and I continue to revisit it. And as a result of revisiting it, I continue to modify my practice. So myself, Robert, when I started coaching, I sold packages of 4 sessions. And then I thought to myself, wait, but that's not really fair to the client. Like, how do I know how many sessions the client needs? So then I started working with the client and bringing the client in and saying, what do you think the number of sessions will be? We can always revise it later, but let's start with your input. And so I started just kind of doing no packages. And then that didn't really feel great to me, because I thought, do I really want to be a coach and just coach for a single session if that's what the client needs? Because I also want to protect my own well-being, and just taking on 100 clients for 1 session isn't going to make me a better coach, and I won't be able to serve everyone as well. So I thought there's also got to be a part of the equation is me. And so now I do kind of this hybrid model where I charge the exact same amount, whether it's 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whether we meet twice this week or once this week, because what you're paying for is me. And we do that as many times as you need, with a certain threshold met. Like, any change that you need to accomplish is going to take a little bit. And I don't know if that little bit is 3 weeks or 6 weeks or what, but it's going to not be less than 3 weeks. And that just, to me, I don't even know if I'm doing it right. And if you ask me in 3 years from now, I'm probably going to be doing something slightly different. And it's that constant evolution of practice that I think is a marker of people who are questioning best practices and thinking about what they're doing. So, Stefan, I'm sorry that I'm such a big talker, because I just only answered number 1, which is the degree of certainty that coaches have and that exists in coaching culture. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. I can talk about more if you want, or we can move on.
No, yes, please. I think you touched on a very important point, and I think it's one of the common questions about whether should coaches or even therapists charge packages, and it's a common practice here, I would say. Like, I think like recently I just came across a school or a training place that offers like 12 weeks of coaching support. Like it's a package deal, right? And so I'm always thinking that how many sessions does a person need? It may all differ. So I think you touched on a very apt topic, and I would love to hear more about the rest of the status quo that you would like to cover.
Sure. I'm going to give you all a really provocative one. Provocative enough that I want to just be upfront with you about it and say, you don't need to agree with me. Even when I say things like packages, if you offer packages, I think that's fine. So long as you've thought it through and you've ended up with a very clear rationale and you've considered all the good things about packages and all the bad things about packages, of which there are many on both sides, and then arrived at your conclusion. That makes me think you're a thoughtful practitioner and that your clients are in good hands. So I'm not here to convert you or to make you think the way I think. I'm just here to grab you by the shoulders and say, consider this. And that's my only demand, is to consider this, regardless of where you end up. So here's my second one. This is part of the zeitgeist. We do it in psychotherapy, we do it in coaching, and we do it with our best friends, and we do it in our own self-development. But we are in the business of making people go to war with themselves. And I don't think it's a good business to be in. Want to be healthy? All you have to do is go to war with your weight. And the thinner you will be victorious. Want to be happy? All you have to do is go to war with those dark thoughts, and the good you will be victorious. The good emotions will go to war with your bad emotions, and the good emotions will be victorious. I think it's really hard to win a battle where you're fighting against yourself. But it's so common. So for those of you who are coaches, you're going to recognize it as soon as I say it. Every single time you've ever asked a client, what's standing in your way? What's holding you back? What are you afraid of? Every time you've combated self-critical thinking, every time you have tried to shift a client away from a so-called negative emotion, you are pitting them at war with themselves. And I think it's really tough because these are common practices, super common practices. Virtually every coach asks these types of questions. So please don't think that I'm criticizing you if you're doing this, because I think you're doing coaching. You're just doing what's normal. You're doing standard practice, and no one should be faulted for that. But you actually can coach people without ever engaging in their problems or self-critical thinking. And in fact, I almost don't believe in self-critical thinking. That's my provocation. I think maybe 10% of what we call self-critical thinking is actually self-critical thinking. And it does exist. I mean, I will acknowledge it. So if someone looks at themselves and says, I'm ugly and worthless, I do think that that is self-critical thinking. I don't think that that is 90% of what we call self-critical thinking. When you hear a client say, I can't do it, that is not self-critical thinking. Do you quick jump in to combat that erroneous cognition and try and get them thinking in a more resilient and optimistic way? Or maybe you just accept them. Yeah, maybe you can't do it. That's an interesting thought. Maybe you're a smart person who's got a pretty good view of your resources and timelines and supports. Maybe you actually can't do it. I don't know if you can or can't, but you know, so why don't you tell me more about what's making you say that? And there's something about engaging a client in that kind of open and accepting way, which shifts the coaching fundamentally from, I see something broken in you, I've diagnosed it unbeknownst to you, and now I'm trying to intervene with it without making that explicit to you, And I totally accept your point of view and I want to explore it. So when my client says, I can't do it, so tell me a little bit more about that. And typically that what we're trying to fix, the self-critical voice, is actually just a little bit of caution, and it's smart. So, what emotion goes with that? I can't do it. And maybe they say doubt. Okay. Well, if doubt had an agenda, what is doubt trying to accomplish? And the answer is never, not once ever, self-sabotage. It's not it. That's not what doubt's trying to do. Doubt's trying to protect me. That's the answer. And suddenly, that's a big difference, because instead of fighting against doubt, this really upsetting, pesky emotion that's causing problems, you now have an ally, because you also want to protect you. And now you and doubt get to work together. Now you're twice as resourceful, because now you have an emotion that wants to work for the very same ends that you want to work for. And it may be true that doubt is using language or a tone that you don't care for. I think it's fine to ask doubt to modify the tone and speak using nicer language. But why would we take away someone's thinking of I can't do it, or I doubt I can do it? Because those are really smart thoughts. And if we fundamentally believe that our clients are smart and not that our clients are full of these broken cognitions, it just changes the nature of the relationship. I hope that you feel provoked by what I'm saying. It does fly in the face of a lot of coaching practice, and I recognize that. So gee, I'm glad that you like that. When you see it happen in coaching, it's profound. I mean, I worked with someone not all that long ago who had been wrestling with an issue for a year, right? And we just did this one intervention where I just said, oh, what is this aspect of you trying to accomplish? And it propelled them past a year's worth of stalemate thinking. And it allows people to befriend themselves. And I think we kind of increasingly live in a time where people are divorced from themselves, or they view that there's all these bad aspects of themselves. And I mostly, like, if you worked with me, I think you're amazing. And I probably think you're more amazing than you are. And that shouldn't be the case. You should be your greatest champion and advocate. You should think you're more amazing than I think you are. And that changes the nature of the coaching relationship. So I gave you two and I talked a lot, so maybe I'll stop there, Stefan.
I think that's really good and great. I like the part you talk about doubt, can be an ally. Second, Suchi on that. And you also got me thinking about the word on broken connection. I think we live in a world with the preoccupation of disease, and we want to solve problems. And it started to help me frame some perspectives. As a practitioner myself, that there's this tendency that we gravitate towards the negativity because we want to solve the issue. And the first word I came to think about is negativity bias. Mm-hmm. And so thank you for sharing about that. I have written down some great pointers, and I'll maybe bounce it through with you later. Yeah. And for positive psychology coaching, I think a common question that we get is about, we learn in positive psychology is to use or to apply positive psychology interventions. And so what do you think that, is it true, or is it a common practice that positive psychology coaching only is all about applying positive psychology interventions in their work? What is your take on this?
I mean, how much can you all take? Can you take a little more of me?
Yes.
Good. Well, 2 thumbs down on positive interventions. I know, right? How could I possibly say that? look, let's get it straight about positive interventions for 1 second. First, positive interventions, were they created by the best technologists in the business? No. They were created by university professors that just wanted to study a phenomenon. So when Mike McCullough and Bob Emmons wanted to figure out, does focusing on good stuff versus bad stuff make a difference? They had students in their class keep track, half the students kept track of daily burdens and hassles, right? Everything that went wrong. And half the students came up with tracked blessings, just things that went right. And it turns out that the blessings group were happier, they went to the gym more, they did better on their homework than the other group. Mike McCullough, I asked him about this recently. He was never trying to create a gratitude exercise or a 3 blessings exercise to be used the world over. He was just trying to dig deep and understand the phenomenon of when you appreciate things versus when you focus on the negative. That's all. And all the interventions are like this. Now, they do work a little. They have small effect sizes. And I think they're okay. And I'm not going to, if I catch you, using a gratitude journal, I'm not going to knock it out of your hand and say, that's not what it's for. I mean, I think that it's a good thing to do. I think it's fine. But here's the truth. None of you need me to tell you to do a gratitude journal. And I think there is an assumption on the behalf of people who know about positive psychology that they know the truth and that all the other people don't. As if all the people out in the world are just sitting around like, God, I wish I knew how to be happy. Here I am 50 years old and 5 decades of life experience, but I don't have the first clue about being happy. If only someone who knew about positive psychology would come along and tell me 8 things that were empirically validated that I could do. You've never met an adult that needs that. Never, not once in your life have you ever come across an adult that needs you to tell them how to be happy. You think they don't know that a barbecue is enjoyable? That sex is enjoyable? That taking care of their kids gives them meaning? That rooting for a soccer team is fun? That having a shared interest with someone can bond them together? They know that. They've been living it each and every day of their lives. What they don't have is time and permission to follow their intuitions about happiness. And that's a big deal. That's the question that we ought to be engaging our clients in, not me telling you to identify your strengths or me telling you to write down things you're grateful for, but me saying, how much permission do you give yourself to be happy? How do you prioritize happiness in your life? Where do you make room for it? And that is a coaching approach. So do I talk about these types of things with my clients? Absolutely. I just don't assign them in a prescriptive way, the positive psychology interventions. I want to be clear. I'm in the minority here. Most positive psychology coaches in the world prescribe homework. They say, I think you should go take the VIA and identify your top 5 strengths, and you should use your strengths in a new way. So here's just another little provocation about that last one. In 20 years of coaching, I've never had a single client ever, not once, and I've had a lot of clients, satisfactorily answer the question, how can you use your strengths in a new way? Not one client ever has had the first clue of how to answer that. Here's how clients answer it. They talk about using it in a new context. So let's say I'm funny at home, and you say, well, how can you use that in a new way? Maybe I could try being funny at work. That's not a new way. That's a new place. What would me using humor in a new way be? Starting to slip on banana peels? I don't do a lot of that. I mean, that would be a different kind of humor that I normally don't engage in. I've just never heard it, because the truth is your clients are using their strengths in good ways. Better questions are things like, who reacts well when you use this strength and who does not? That could help you learn to use your strengths better, is by understanding the social context in which your strengths occur and figuring out who you shouldn't be using this with and who you should be using it with. What's the right amount to use it in, but not in a new way. That to me is a nonsensical question. Although clients will gladly answer it, but I guarantee you what they're going to answer is using it in a new context. So I just said lots of provocative stuff. I'll come up for air there.
Thank you, Robert. I think these are great pointers, and it also got me to think about how I can improve myself with these new awareness as a coach. And we talk about being a great coach or being a better coach. I'm curious to hear your opinions about what's a great coach to you? What would be your definition of a great coach? I mean, of course, I would love to hear your perspective on this.
It's a really good question. The coach David Peterson, who I really respect, said it's really easy to be a good coach. Like anyone with decent social skills and emotional intelligence, and who's, you know, a decent communicator can be a good coach. Easy to be a good coach and hard to be a great coach. And the world is just full to the brim of good coaches. And maybe that's okay, because maybe good is good enough. Like, that's all right. But there are relatively fewer great coaches. And I don't know if I'm the final arbiter of what's a great coach and what's not, but I do know that in my conversations with coaches, the people I consider to be great have some hallmark features. Integrity is one of them. So I don't think you can be a great coach without a really firm foundation of ethical thinking. And I don't think ethics are rules that you follow. I think ethics are principles that help you think through complicated issues. And we're constantly, every time I coach, I'm dealing with ethical issues. I just told a class that I taught today, you should probably be having conversations with your colleagues every 2 months about ethics. You should be talking about an ethical issue at least every 2 months. And if you're not having 6 conversations a year about, here was something I faced, or you know, I didn't know how to handle this, then you're not doing it enough. If you think that you're not being faced with 6 complicated ethical issues a year, you're missing what counts under that umbrella. Beyond integrity, I would say probably the biggest thing is presence. So for those of you who are coaches, you'll be familiar with the phrase coaching presence. For those of you who aren't coaches, coaching presence has two facets. One facet is being present, just paying attention. And there are so many obstacles to paying attention. For example, if any of you have a phone in sight right now, I don't have your full attention. Studies show this very clearly. When you're in a meeting like this, your memory, your recall for this conversation will be lower than the people that didn't even have a phone out. You don't have to be using the phone. It just has to be in your line of sight. Reading comprehension goes down if you can see a phone. Again, not use it, just see it. My phone is never in my office. Like, I just don't bring it in here because of this. So being present is in part paying attention. When the other big thing is internal though, not these external distractors, but internal. So beginner coaches are always trying to think of their next question. Experienced coaches have so overlearned the process of asking questions that we don't have to devote that many cognitive resources to it, which allows us to simply be in the moment with the client and notice. I'm noticing what the client is saying. I'm noticing how they're saying it. I'm noticing their facial expression. I'm noticing what they're not saying. I'm noticing trends. I'm noticing patterns from one session to another. I'm noticing just what they're talking about right this second. And as a result of all that noticing, I have so many more options of the types of questions I can ask. So that presence, I think, is massive for great coaching. And I also think change, that if you could, I set a goal for myself early on. Every 6 months, I want to be able to say how my coaching is different than it was 6 months ago. I want some kind of quantum leap forward somewhere. I'm engaged in different types of business practices. I do my initial intake or chemistry session in a different way. My contracts look different. I'm really focusing on using metaphors more. Whatever it is, you should be changing across the course. And if you find that you're coaching this year kind of like you were last year, you're probably not questioning enough. You're probably not taking in new information enough or trying new things enough. And I see coaches just get stuck on this, right? Like, oh, I just do somatic interventions. And so I just ask every client, where in your body are you feeling that? What do you notice about the way you're holding your body? Those are excellent questions. I don't mean to make light of them, but you can't then just get stuck in that. And now that's what you do with every single client, regardless. You want to be flexible and sort of give clients what they need, each different client based on that. So those are some of the, I think, the big qualities. Yeah. There's probably others, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Robert, thank you for sharing that. And I think there's one question from the crowd.
Is it from Monisha?
Yes. So she's asking, what's the third status quo of coaching that you think needs to be challenged? I think we cannot go past that third. We love to hear.
The idea that there's a universally correct and consistent way to coach. So the largest coaching accrediting body in the world is the International Coaching Federation, the ICF. But all coaching organizations, whether it's the EMCC, the ASC, whatever it is, they all have the same problem. And I'm not criticizing them for this, because if you and I started a coaching organization, we'd have this problem, which is if you want to certify people, you need to have some standards for practice. But what you do as a result of that is get standards like, oh, I think you should contract with people and you should evoke awareness, and you have these competencies, as if that's just what coaching should look like. And I think in the abstract, that is what coaching looks like, but it is an almost willful disregard of culture. I mean, culture is a pretty big deal. And do we think for 1 second that as an American, I should coach an American the exact same way as I should coach someone in Malaysia? Should there be some differences? Maybe. What about just small things like the expression of emotion differing across cultures, standards for eye contact differing across cultures, status and hierarchy, and how that plays into to the coaching relationship? Because, you know, the Western egalitarian view of coaching, and make no mistake, this came out of the United States, and the ICF is an American-based institution. We're like, oh, everyone should just be equal. Yeah, but what happens when you go to a society that's highly hierarchical? Do you believe that a 20-year-old in Japan should be coaching a 50-year-old senior leader? Is that appropriate? And I think we need to listen to people in local culture and say, maybe there are some variations here that make certain things more or less appropriate. I have a good colleague, Christian van Nieuwerburg. He wrote a book called Coaching in Islam. And it's really interesting to me because he's from Lebanon and he works in the Middle East quite a bit. And he says when he is coaching with religious Muslims in the Gulf, he can't ask them what their goals are. And that's a big deal because coaching is about people articulating their goals and working towards their goals. But for many religious Muslims, it's almost blasphemous to say like, oh, next year I'll be the vice president, because inshallah, right? You can't say what you're going to be next year. So instead, it's really important to couch the conversation in terms of intentions. What are your intentions? And it might seem like that's just a small word game, but it's not. And in doing so, there's a degree of cultural sensitivity that allows for more safety for clients. And I think that this is true all over the world. And I think this is a place that we're just beginning to scratch the surface, which is we don't know all that much about coaching across cultural boundaries. And I think we need to know more, and that's there's a need for research for sure and better practice guidelines. So that's one thing I would change, is just the idea that there's this heavily universal approach and that we figured out what that is.
That's fascinating, Robert. And I think in the interest of time, I think there are some more questions that are popping up, but I would like to ask you the question because, we are inviting you to come to Singapore in June for a week. And the first 3 days, you'll be running the positive psychology coaching training. And would you like to share a little bit with us, what is it like in that, what will be like in the 3 days PPC training, and what will we learn in that 3 days workshop?
Yeah, so what'll it be like? There's two things it'll be like. One, it'll be like this. So if you already hate this experience and you're like, whoa, Robert is just pushing on me and he's so full of himself and he's just so arrogant, thinks he's like the big guy that just wants to push back on coaching, then I'm not for you. So let's be honest about that. If you're like, these are kind of intriguing questions, this is a different way to look at things, then that's what the 3-day training is going to be like. Because yeah, I got 3 days of this stuff for sure. I got 10 days of this stuff. So whether you're new to coaching or an experienced coach, I'm pretty good at engaging you and reflecting about the processes that make up coaching. So even while I'm teaching basic coaching skills, I'm empowering you to think about coaching in a different way and even to disagree with me. So the tone is going to be a whole lot like this. Hopefully, you hear enough safety under my provocations. So I just want to say this, and it's going to be a little strange to say. I am a pretty confident person, but I'm also a pretty humble person. And I don't think the stuff I'm saying is correct, honestly. I just think it's worth considering. I don't even know if I agree with it. And I think there's an amount of humility in that I would hope you would find safe, that I'm really not here to tell you you're doing it wrong. Also, I really care about students and about how people learn and about good coaching practice. And so I do want to create safety and trainings where we can have conversations and even disagree with one another. Someone say, I think we should sell packages, or I think it's okay to ask about self-limiting beliefs. Okay, that's also okay. I just want us all to think it through. In terms of the behavioral experience, the training is experiential. It will not be like this in that I am doing a whole lot of talking here, and we'll do a whole lot of activities there. I don't think I can lecture you. You know, if you're used to PowerPoint, you'll be disappointed. If you're used to someone giving you all the slides, you won't find that here. If you want a demanding instructor who says, I'm going to show up 100% and I want you to show up 100% because that's how we're all going to get the best out of everything. So why don't I do some coaching demonstrations? Why don't we discuss it? Why don't we talk about what I did wrong in that coaching demonstration? What things I didn't like that I did? Let's go practice coaching. Let's have small group discussions about coaching. Let's engage in fun little, games and stuff as we learn this. It's highly experiential. That's what I'm shooting for. And in terms of content, a large part of it will just be about coaching with some overlay of positive psychology. So we will just talk about asking powerful questions, for example. And for those who are new, you're going to learn the foundational skills of asking powerful questions. And for those of you who are more experienced, you're going to learn new things about asking questions. Like, have you ever thought about symmetries and asymmetries in questions? Knowing like a 2x2, like, does the client know the answer and does the coach know the answer to the question? What about a question that neither one knows the answer to? What about a question that both knows the answer to? What about the question that the coach knows the answer to, but the client doesn't? Or the client knows the answer to, but the coach doesn't? Those are all 4 different types of questions. Have you ever considered those and why you might or might not use them in your coaching? Those are the kinds of things that we will be talking about. And as I said, my positive psychology is generally hidden and it's in the background and it just sort of informs my coaching. And we will be spending about 1/3 of our time on that. I don't know if that's specific enough, but that's kind of my overview thinking.
Thank you, Robert. Maybe we have one last question here from Lauren. What got you started into coaching? She's interested to know.
Okay, quickly. I was in training to be a psychotherapist. I got my master's degree in clinical psychology. I loved helping people in a clinical capacity, but I also knew that I didn't want to do it for a living, that I couldn't imagine myself 20 years from now, sitting in a room with someone hearing about depression. I think it's great to help people with depression, but I knew that I wasn't the person to do it. So instead, I got the world's best job, which is to travel the world and study happiness. And I did that for a long time. But I always missed that helping, doing research was fun and the travel experiences were exciting. And I love the acquisition of knowledge, but I really missed just helping people. And so, but around like 2001, maybe 2002, I came across coaching. And I was like, oh, this is like the best of what I wanted out of psychotherapy, but without the things that I wouldn't be particularly good at in psychotherapy. And so it was highly attractive to me in that way. And so I went from there. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us, Robert. And thank you so much for your wonderful insights. Very provocative dialogue, and I'm sure it has put in a lot of new thoughts into people who are interested in coaching or who would like to launch a new career in coaching. So, yep. So we look forward to seeing you, Robert.